Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata Judah. Kata Judah is our sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. So, what I'm here to do is to give a platform to men so they can share their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows. What tools, practices, insights, or wisdom, knowledge did they pick up along the way that they can now share with the other men watching, and of course, us women who are walking right there by their side? Today's guest is a man from America, and his name is Michael Zinn. Now, Michael is a photographer and a creative visionary, and he has his own podcast, which is called The Live Stream of Consciousness. So I'm really excited to be chatting to Michael and hearing all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, Michael Zinn. Welcome to Heart Warriors. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Gemma?
I'm really well, thank you. So you're in America. What part of America are you in?
I live in New York on Long Island in a town called Patchogue.
Cool. And I know you've watched a few of these Heart Warrior episodes. So in the pre-chat, I said, oh, I'll mix it up a bit for you. So your first question is, what is the meaning of consciousness?
Oh, that's a great one. That is so great.
Because that's always the first question Michael asks on his podcast. So there we go.
Exactly. I was expecting, I was actually looking to see if I could find a couch, get myself a little comfortable because I've been watching your show and I love what you're doing, by the way. Before I answer the question, I'm not trying to avoid it, but I love what you're doing. And I love the way it's like this very therapeutic session and conversation. It's almost like I felt like I should get on a couch and be at the therapist and just kind of go through my life. But what is consciousness? That's a great question. I feel like consciousness is the source that runs through us all, that runs through the universe, and kind of it's what gives this three-dimensional being life and animation, and the consciousness is that part of source that is coming into an individual to experience the rest of source. um I know it's always it's not a question you can answer in one or two sentences, and there's so many different levels to it. But I just feel like consciousness is the basis of everything. It's the basis of the universe.
Yeah, I love that. It's pretty similar to the answer that I gave when you interviewed me too. So, of course,
Your answer was great, and I think I told you a lot of people answer that question from either the I am perspective or the collective perspective, and your answer was all the little spaces in between, and I just love that. That was awesome.
awesome. All right. Well, I didn't manage to throw you off track there, so we'll get back onto Heart Warriors. So, who is the man inside? Who is Michael Zinn without his labels?
You know what? I think uh I'm at a point where I can answer that question. I don't think I would have been able to answer that question in my younger days, but I think inside of me is a being that is uh aware of itself, aware of everything else, and I guess has this longing to make that connection a good one, and just keep that connection going, and um connect with the collective, try to I love having this. My podcast is all about these discussions, right? About consciousness and what is it. And I just love talking about it. And the cool thing is I don't think I'm ever trying to actually figure it out. I'm just like weaving my way through it and feeling it, and just experiencing it rather than trying to define it and come to an end.
Yeah, Yeah, and this is so true. And this is why, well, your podcast, every time you interview someone unique and get a different answer. And the same with the Heart Warriors, all these questions that I sort of keep as a general flow, each man has got a different answer to. And so, of course, for the men watching, it allows them to broaden their spectrum and find their little niche of authenticity, which, from the discussions is the number one thing that every man and woman needs to be aligned with their true authenticity. So let's look at little Michael now. What was his
Okay.
major challenge growing up?
I have to say, I feel like I was pretty blessed in a lot of ways. I mean, I did come from a divorced home, and so there were some challenges associated with that. But I don't think that for me, I don't think I ever felt a lack of love or questioned if I was loved. And the reason that makes me feel blessed is because I see, a lot of people who I know and I hear their experiences. And, to hear someone say, I don't remember my mom or my dad ever saying I love you, that's like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine that. And it's not like my mom and dad were overly, affectionate or loving, but I certainly knew that I was loved, and I feel blessed about that. I didn't have a lot of the things that I see in other families and in other people, things that they've experienced, abuse, and there's so much uh there's so many layers to the human ego, and even within families, how families interact with each other. And so again, I feel like I was blessed. My parents did get divorced. There was never abuse. There was some infidelity or whatever. I don't need to get too personal, but even that, I think, was a bit of a lesson, and later in my life, to see how that affected me at the time and affected my own relationships, was what allowed me to grow and be able to evolve in my relationships and go from unsuccessful relationships into successful relationships.
Oh, well, let's
And
get into this. What was it about? I'm presuming your parents' infidelity that gave you the lesson and affected your relationships. What?
Mhm. Well, I think, when I was younger, um it kind of hmm, what are the words I'm looking for? I'm always kind of very specific about my words, because they're so powerful. Um, I mean, I guess it kind of validated infidelity to me as I was younger. I mean, I think there's a part of growing up and being young that experiencing life, you're looking for what makes you feel good, right? And I think that for me, and I think in society, sexuality is something that's like, especially for older people, because it's changing, thankfully. It was like, men were expected to, boys will be boys kind of thing, and there were just these expectations on the masculine and the feminine, which is also why I love your show. These discussions are just so important. um so I kind of gave myself excuses to not practice fidelity in relationships, but through that experience I learned how I affected other people, and through hurting people, I learned how that felt to me. And so maybe the having an extra partner might have felt good to my ego, but causing someone pain felt worse. And it was a much it was like a decision, you know what I mean? So you know i I was able to start to view relationships and people in general, not just love relationships, as reflections. So the whole basic thing of life, treat others as you would wish to be treated. You know what I mean? That's true in relationships. And the sad thing, I think, is it's least evident in the people you're closest to. You know what I mean? I think I was having a discussion with my mom just the other night about how, you know, the people who aren't closest to me experience a much different person, right? And people, she was watching something somebody said on a clip, like, oh, I can't imagine you ever getting angry, and she was like, who's that guy talking about? And I'm like, well, those people that experience me outside of my relationships and my family, um they have less expectations of me. And so that was the discussion we got into. When your family has expectations on you, it causes this, there's so much ego involved, and it's great to learn what that means and be able to step back sometimes, even though you're still human. So you're still you're still gonna have that ego. You can't, I don't think anyone can truly strip themselves of it. You can certainly be aware of it, and I don't want to say control it, but be accountable for it.
Yeah.
That's a better word. I like that word.
This is fascinating, Michael. Can I just dig one little bit deeper into this? The turning point for you. What was happening when you went from infidelity is okay to infidelity is not okay? What was that turning point?
Um, you know what? I think I was in a relationship that felt really good to me. The connection that I had with this woman felt, I would describe it at times as it felt like home. It was that much comfort, being with that person. Um, and I guess at that point, I still I didn't realize that was the relationship that showed me really what it meant to affect another person so deeply. Because um the infidelity that happened in that relationship was I'm, I love that I speak, and as I'm speaking, I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. It was minor. I know that doesn't sound right, but it wasn't 100% intimate. It was a bit of an infidelity of attention. It wasn't intimacy necessarily, um, but that didn't matter. The woman I was in a relationship with just could not see me the same way, and it was like the person that I was ripped from her existence, so the person that she was to me was ripped from my existence, because she was not responding to me the same way at all. And it was so eye-opening to have somebody who responded to you in a way that made you feel like they were home, to responding to you in a way that they wanted nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? And that was pretty severe. And I think that was the turning point for me. And thankfully, I think part of that, learning to have respect for the other person in the relationship, had a lot to do with showing me self-love. I don't think I had self-love at that point, and I think that was more of the root of the behavior than the love for the other person. So I think that started me on my path to self-love, and very soon after, I think I was able to feel like I achieved that self-love.
Interesting. Thank you for opening up about that. So
Mm.
let's get back into some more of your adulthood. What was the lowest moment for you, the rock bottom point?
Ooh. I'm gonna go back to the same situation. I think, for me, being in a relationship that I thought was something different for me, like I was in a relationship that I thought was the one, and then losing that relationship on my own accord, because of my own actions, that was low. I was pretty depressed and heartbroken, and um disappointed in myself.
How do you work through something like that? If you're disappointed with yourself, how do you work through that to a place of where you can be at peace with yourself?
I think it was just a lot of self-reflection. You know, it was a lot of like, how can this be? You know, like how can this person who I was felt like was a part of me feel so separate from me? And I had to figure that out. And again, coming to the conclusion that it was my own, I was accountable for that. I think that was, it was both very difficult and also super awesome, you know, at that moment, to be like, wow, I'm in control. I made that decision, and I can make other decisions, and I can, you know, treat other people in a different way. And I got to say, it has affected my current relationship in the most amazing of ways. I mean, I am so much more of the person that I never even thought I could be. I think because of the experience that I had.
What do you think is like from a, because I know a lot of women watch this, so, and I know you can only speak for yourself, but from your understanding of men, what are the reasons for infidelity?
I think there's kind of two parts to that. One, I think is well, maybe a few parts. The absence of self-love, and insecurity. I guess that kind of goes together. You know, there's like this insecurity, and not really loving yourself. So you, again, you feel like it's okay, and you validate your actions to yourself. Um, and then I think the other part of that is society. I think that, the way, the current paradigm, the way that we grow up, I think we are layered and layered with all of these kind of ideas of how it's supposed to be and what we're supposed to be, and what's impressive to others. And I think when you're young and you look at different careers, you're like, oh, that looks great, I want to do that. um but as you get older, I think you start to, like, let's say you a baseball player, right? You want to be a baseball player, and you're like, that looks so great, I want to do that, and you get into baseball and you're playing baseball. But now you're starting to compare yourself to other people, and you're like, oh, well, this guy's a much better baseball player than me, and he has a much better chance of being a baseball player than me. And so now you start that self-doubt. And again, I don't think that, I mean, obviously it comes from inside, but I think that it's part of the way society has set up the systems of what is success. What are we supposed to be? All of these expectations, again, back to expectations. I think that's a big buzzkill. Any sort of expectation of anything, is a buzzkill. You've got to kind of go into it being like, I'm here, I'm gonna bring my best self into whatever the situation is, and that's it. Not expect anything, just know that you're bringing your best self into the situation, and that's where the magic will happen.
Yeah.
Just show up. I like to say that on my show, like, just show up. Like, even if you don't know what you're going to do, you know who you are, and if you just show up, you're bringing you, and that's all you need to do.
Yeah.
So
Did you ever have any addictions to substances?
um I certainly smoked a lot of weed in college. And I still partake. I think I struggled with whether it was addiction or not, and I certainly think it's there's a aspect of vice to it. And I think there's it really depends. There's an aspect of, I mean, plant medicine, is plant medicine for a reason, right? I think that there are connections that we have to certain things that, are beneficial. And I think, like, I guess, like you're saying, an addiction would be not really moderation, right? An addiction would be overusing a substance, or, feeling like you can't function without it.
Yeah, I see it as a where's the control? Is Are we in control? Like we can not go, we can put it down, not go with it for a week or a few days, or is the substance in control of us?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, I'm in control. I've certainly gone through periods where I felt like I wasn't. And that's when I would question it, and say, hey, is this addiction, is this bad, and I would figure it out and regain the control, and you know so yeah, I don't think I struggle with addiction, the way that addicts do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about masculinity. You've interviewed a whole range of men as well. I know you interview women as well. What's your definition of healthy masculinity?
um well, it's interesting, and I guess I can get to that, but I really feel like the more important question is healthy humanity. I think this I don't want to say division, because you don't approach it that way, of masculine and feminine. That's there's a masculine and feminine in each of us, and so I think a healthy masculinity is a healthy sense of self. I mean, as long as you uh, feel good about who you are, you feel good about how you treat everybody who you deal with, all you're accountable for your energy exchange. That's the way I like to put it. Like, that's a healthy masculinity. I love, again, part of why I love watching your show is the discussions about toxic masculinity, dark masculinity, all of these different kind of uh, labels, or variations of what masculinity can be. For me, I was never like a man's man. You know what I mean? I don't like to do boxing and wrestling and kind of violent sports. To me, those seem kind of violent. But I certainly can understand, I don't judge anyone who's into that and be like, oh, you just want to be violent. You know what I mean? Um, I probably am a little bit more in touch with my feminine side than, guys like that. um, Although there are plenty of guys who box and fight and who are in touch with their feminine side. So I think, again, it's more like a healthy humanity and a healthy tolerance for others. Anything that's unhealthy, I guess, like toxic masculinity, would be guys who look at other guys and it'll be like, oh, that guy's a fag, or whatever they might say, and not accept another guy unless he's the same. You know what I mean? And I think that's just, again, back to a general statement about health and mental well-being and mental philosophy and state of understanding.
Yeah. So, how did you learn to be a man? Can you remember growing up? Did you have a good example from your father or other male role models around you? What's your earliest memory of what it means to be a man?
You know what? I think uh after my parents split, there was a few years that it was my mom and just me and my brother. But not too many years later, my mom got remarried, and my stepfather was such an amazing example of, again, I want to say being a man, but just being a human, being a good human, because he loved my mom, and he was a I know this may not be relevant to you in Australia, but he was living in Queens, which is more like the city area, and he was a firefighter, and at the time the firefighters had been laid off, so he met my mom. They were both in the unemployment line, and they met, and they started dating, and he just, I guess it was his upbringing and just what he thought it was to be a man. But when he and my mom got closer and they decided to get married, he moved us out to a fancy part of Long Island, They built a house. His firefighter salary was not quite enough to live in that part of town, so he had an amazing work ethic. He would do things like he would buy a waxing machine and then go wax the floors at businesses, at 6 in the morning before he had to go out to the fire department. So he really instilled an amazing work ethic and patriarchal kind of ethic in a good sense, like taking care of the family. Like it was always important for him. Him and my mom soon after had a baby girl, so I have a sister, younger sister from that. And him, the way he took care of the family was certainly, I think, a great example of how to be a man, and how to take care of your family.
Yeah.
So
How is it now in New York around? I mean, this show's about men and masculinity. I mean, we all know it's about ultimately humanity, but, this show is directly focused on men. So, what's
right.
the vibe currently in New York around men and masculinity?
I think it's a hot topic, not just in New York, but everywhere right now. And uh, the whole idea of how you treat others, I think, is being in question, specifically towards men, because it's how men treat women, and I guess also how men might treat other men who aren't masculine. Um, so I think it's a hot topic, and I think uh there's a lot of pressure on men right now, how to act, like what is a woman expecting. But to be fair, I think there's a lot of pressure on women now to decide, you know that same thing. And the thing to me is that it's too specific. You can't say, like, I like this type of guy, and that's it, because there's not ever really only one aspect to a person. People have so many different aspects to them. You can like certain traits. You can like somebody who's, a little more into boxing or something like that, because that's what, turns you on. You like that strength or whatever it might be. But that doesn't say anything else about that person. You know what I mean? There's so many other aspects. So, I think the fact that it's a conversation is good, and I hope people start to take that discussion again as a general thing of how we all treat each other, and how we should be accountable for our own actions. I think that's the biggest thing for me. People have not really been held accountable to how they behave and treat others, for the most part. And I'm glad to see it starting to happen. And it's duality. So there's good and evil. So just as much as you see people who are stepping up and treating other people great, there's also people who are coming to the forefront who are not treating other people great. And again, I think that has to happen for us to have the discussion. Right? We need to all see it, and we need to all be aware of it and talking about it.
Yeah. So I'm asking about New York because this is your direct experience living there. Do you see things around the topic of men and healthy masculinity? Do you see things are improving or degrading, specifically in your,
In my area,
yeah, which direction is the collective moving in?
it's hard to say, because um for me, part of my philosophy is that your life is where you focus your energy, right? So I try to focus my energy on a positive community, on positive news. Obviously, you can't change the news that's happening. I can turn it off, but I can't change it. And so there is plenty of news of increasing crimes, and I guess when it comes to masculinity, even in masculine crimes, men being violent to women. um it's interesting because I've always had this amazing respect for women. I've never felt this battle between men and women. I see it, but I don't feel it. It's not a part of who I am and how I interact with women. um but I think it's just tough. Again, I feel like I want to say, oh, men are having a hard time, but it's also tough for the women because I think it's the times that we're in, right? The times that we're in, the the there's an energetic force that is trying to push this narrative of division, right? And make make you look at someone else and judge them. And and again, I see that happening, but because of who I am and where I focus my energy, there's also people who are focused on the collective and helping each other, and people who want to live life in servitude of other people. And so for me, I'm not specifically like a light worker. I don't have a gift that I specifically uh, bill myself as a psychic medium or anything like that. But I do feel like just by who you are and how you treat people and the philosophies that you emulate, you can affect other people, and you have these ripples. And again, that's what these conversations are. That's what these kinds of interactions are. They're all about empowering everybody and not fighting, discussing stuff, and not being like, well, this is what I think, and we're not fighting. I don't think any of the discussions I've seen you have ever get, they're not about that. There's no even intention to do that. And I think it's unfortunate. I see a lot of people um creating content, and that's almost like that's what sells these days. You know what I mean? Looking to agitate people, and you see these posts like, what really pisses you off, and it's like, well, why would you want to know? Why don't you ask, like, what really makes you happy? Why would you want to start that discussion? You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate, but I think that's, again, more comfortable to people because that's the way society kind of programmed them. um so
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully we're in a time where things are changing, and I do believe that. I believe there's a massive shift happening, again, because where I choose to focus my energy and the things that I see. um I do think consciousness is opening up. People are becoming more conscious, more curious about things, looking for healing. Sound healing is becoming huge, and I love that. I have some friends who do sound healing, and it's like, people who maybe aren't on the spiritual community might hear about sound healing and they're into music, and so they go check it out, and it's like it's a way to get that same energetic vibe across, without the spirituality woo woo talk.
yeah. Well, let's get into spirituality then. Did you have a religious upbringing? What was your earliest memory of religion,
Well,
spirituality?
I was raised Jewish. So both my mom and my dad were Jewish, and I was raised to have a bar mitzvah, which is the celebration when you're 13 in the Jewish tradition. You have a celebration that now you go from childhood to manhood, and you can participate in the chores and the farm or whatever the traditions might have been. But at that point, I was given a choice after my bar mitzvah: do I want to continue with my religious studies or not? And I always had an issue with certain things about organized religion. In my opinion, or in my experience, organized religion has kind of been um, manipulated to control people. And at the heart of religion is that same thing that we said before, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And love is supposed to be at the heart of all religions. But then how does religion separate people? How do wars happen over religion, right? And things like that. So I struggled with organized religion, and I decided kind of not to continue. And I don't think I was I forget which words mean what, but I never didn't believe in a higher power. I always believed in a higher power. I always knew that there was something bigger than me that I didn't understand because I just couldn't. It was what created me. And that, I think, my issues with organized religion um had me struggling with the word God for many, many years. I struggled with the word God, and that has a lot to do with the personification of the concept of God, right? I mean, because you say God to a lot of people, and they think guy in a robe and a beard, and it's a guy, or maybe they're a feminist and it's a girl, but it's still like a being. And to me, that just it just wasn't working for me. um and then I think as I did start to understand myself and other people more, I substituted the word God for universe. Anytime anybody said it, in my head it was like it switched immediately, so I could understand what they were trying to say. And then eventually it got to the point where it's like, okay, now I can say the word God and know what I mean and not worry about the heavy connotations that are surrounding it. And the same thing I think is true for the word faith. That was another word I struggled with because it was so heavily connected to religion, faith in Jesus Christ, or faith in religion. And when I came to the realization that faith was just the idea of believing in something that you can't explain, or that you don't understand, and just but truly believing in it, like saying, okay, I don't need to know it, but I know that it's there. um you know that that's when I came to terms with the word faith. And so um I think those things were just helpful for me to, again, to that self-love, understanding myself, and being able to see myself. One thing that I'll say that's kind of interesting about self-love, and I just thought of it, it's just like kind of a little bit of a philosophy that I have, is because I feel like so many people really don't. It sounds easy. Some people are like, oh yeah, I love myself, I treat myself good, but when you look in the mirror, do you truly love yourself? And I think that's when you really know. And you may not want to admit that but so when I would like go be in the bathroom, or I'd walk by a mirror and I'd catch a glance of myself in the mirror, I knew it wasn't self-love. And one day I decided, and I haven't had any children, but I have nephews. I've been around the process. I know how beautiful babies are, and children, and the whole thing. I think it's, if I have any regrets in life, it's that I have never had a child. But I can only imagine what it must be like to gaze at your child. I feel like that is when you are truly experiencing unconditional love. Like, it doesn't matter, there's nothing other than love when you're looking at your child. And this is, again, just what I imagine, because I haven't had that experience. But I said, that's what I need to see in the mirror when I pass by the mirror. I need to be able to gaze at myself and feel unconditional love, and and I knew I didn't. And I worked on it. I started to go to meditations, and I started to hang around with a spiritual community and do spiritual thought exercises in different workshops, and kind of start to contemplate these different things. And then one day I happened to walk by the mirror, and it hit me, and I was just like, holy crap. And I just had this big beaming smile, and I was like, I love myself. I can't believe it. And it was very significant. There was a difference. It was a dividing line. Maybe it wasn't a specific moment, but I guess that was the moment when I realized it. But yeah, it's just been my life is completely different, once I realized that.
Wow. This is great, Michael. Can you please speak directly to men who are struggling around this issue of self love? A lot of men are holding on to shame and guilt and, remorse, or still brokenhearted from relationships. And they just, it's not anything you can fake that when you look in the mirror. And how does a man work through that? What can you say to those men?
That's a great question, and I think there are a few things. I think one, the most important thing is anything that you've done or experienced doesn't define you. There's always a moment to make another decision, to try another path, to think another way about it. So whether that be things that you may have done that you're not proud of, or things that have been done to you, that you're ashamed of, those moments don't define you, and it's the now moment that's the most important. It's the now moment that you're living in, that you can decide how you want to be, who you want to be. So I would say, one, that's important, that not to let the past define you. And I had the other one too. Comparison. I think that was another big, huge one for me when I realized and I started thinking about all of the things that I am instead of all of the things that I am not. That was just so powerful to realize. I love this. Like, I can say, and I can look at it and be like, oh man, that person has this or that person has this. I can never be that person, right? And that's okay. That may be a tough pill to swallow. Oh, that person has all this. Shit, I could never be that person. But here's something even better and cooler than that. That person can never be me. And no one can ever be me except me. I'm the only one who can be me. And that, oh my God, that I would say that to those men who are struggling. Nobody can be you. Don't struggle, be proud of who you are, and be accountable for your next move. You know what I mean? And listen, I certainly can understand how things that have happened to you can get in your brain and just hold you back. And you can't, you feel like you can't stop thinking about them, but you can. You know what I mean? You are in control. I have this kind of ongoing argument with a buddy of mine who, he's very, very cynical, and I constantly am ribbing him about how, and telling him, like, your cynicism and that energy is why you swim in that energy. You know what I mean? Because that's, put out some good energy. And he insists that his cynicism is a response to the world around him. And I say, okay, it's a response, but who's deciding what that response is? It's your choice. It's not a response, it's a choice. Like, that's why I love the word accountability so much, because once you realize that it's your choice, you can start making those better choices. So
So
yeah.
powerful, wonderful. You mentioned meditation, Michael. Um, what sort of meditation did you do? How long did you do it for? Let's get into that story.
So I have a friend who we were working on music together. He's a musician, and I'm a musician, so we were kind of working on that life together. And he started to study hypnotism. He was studying to be a hypnotist, which led him to meditation, and he started doing guided meditations. And I kind of always had wanted to try it, and I did. And he was just an amazing guide. It was just about really thought and the way that you're perceiving things to understand. Because I think most people, when they hear meditation, they're like, I don't know how to do it, I can't turn my brain off. and it's not about turning your brain off. It's really almost about turning your brain on even more. Mindfulness, they say mindfulness. So some of the exercises that we would do to get into a meditative state were to get in a comfortable position, close our eyes, but be aware of everything. So he had essential oils, so you'd get a little essential oil on your wrist and you would smell it. He had the spa music going in the background, so you would hear that. And then you would hear freeway noise outside. So as you're closing your eyes, he would talk about that. He's like, smell the smells, hear the sounds, hear the sounds outside. And that would put you in a state where you were almost like, instead of turning your brain off, you were like hyper aware of everything that was going on in that moment. But your eyes were closed and you were still like in this other place, even though you were aware of everything that was going on around you. And that's like such a testament to the power of the human mind and the powers that we have inside of us, right? I mean, you know, so meditating was definitely something that helped me. I've always been a very calm and relaxed person, so I think it just kind of helped me uh tune into that a little bit more. um and uh it, I don't know, I don't really know what else to say about meditation. Did that answer the question?
Do you
I
still meditate? Is it a regular practice, or it was something you did a few years ago and stopped doing?
Well, a few years ago, I would do it regularly in the group meditation. So it was like every Saturday, at 10 o'clock, I would go, and that was kind of my regular thing. And then I think, once you understand what meditation is, I think you can utilize it in your own way. So I started kind of doing my own things. I mean, every night I would go to bed, I put on YouTube either like a 432 hertz or binaural beats, and this music that just, it's so calming. And I think it does have an effect when you're sleeping in the subconscious. Sometimes I would have these really lucid dreams when I would put on certain types of that music. So I think I do still meditate. It's just in a different way, but I am craving going back to the group meditations because I do think it's a different experience. I think there's I'm so much more attuned to energy now. So when you're in a group setting, you really can tune into the energy of the group. I had an amazing experience in a meditation. I'll tell this story because this one is a great one. I have only a few times felt that I have experienced like a true metaphysical experience, like I would say crossing realms, like feeling like I'm actually, you know, touching another dimension, or crossing over into the spirit world or whatever it might be. And one of those happened during a meditation. There was a woman who came into the meditation with her daughter, who was probably 8 or 9 years old. And Steve, my friend, was telling the story of how she came to the meditation, but amazingly enough, she, even though she's young, she already meditates at school. They do meditation, so she understood what meditation was, and she was happy to be here. And it was kind of cool to hear her little story beforehand. So we're meditating, and I have a friend of mine to the right. Across from me is this woman and her daughter. And again, it was one of the very few times where I had almost like a visual of the room. And I saw my friend Linda, who was next to me, and I saw we were bathed in light. We were all just kind of in meditation position. Oh, you can't see my whole body. We were all just kind of in meditation pose, and I saw it from above, like a little bit of an out of body experience. And I hope I don't get emotional when I tell the story. In that vision, the young girl stood up and walked over to me, and she said, "Everything's going to be all right." Here, I'm getting emotional. um And it was awesome, beautiful moment in the meditation, and I didn't really even think twice about it. um I didn't realize that it was kind of that out of body experience. But then when we were done, there's always this kind of session where people talk about what they experienced, whoever wants to share if they experienced anything specific. And often I would share, but I wanted to kind of share that I experienced that, but I don't think I did. I just kind of I didn't share that until after everybody was up and leaving and saying goodbye. I was standing with Steve, and this woman walked over, and Steve introduced me to the woman, and I said hello and shook her hand, and then he introduced me to the daughter, and she walked over to me and she hugged my leg. And like, when you're introduced to a child, they don't normally, they're normally they're afraid, you know what I mean? Or they're it just was not the normal response to being introduced to a child. And I just felt I was brought back instantly to that moment in the meditation. And I guess I even just kind of remembered it, and got really emotional all of a sudden. I was just like, this girl knows something, you know what I mean? Like, this girl was connected to me. Excuse me. um but it was such an amazing experience. Like, I literally felt like I had crossed realms, like an alternate, not an alternate, but I guess in my belief system now, I believe that we all have these higher aspects of ourselves in different dimensions. And so it was like it was communicating with that other dimension. It was really awesome.
Wow. Did you find it meditation helped with your creative talents at all? When you were in the thick of meditating, that period when, you were doing it more often, did your creativity expand?
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, I think it did. I mean, I call myself a creative professional, so I am creative just by nature. I do visual art for a living. I do photography and video, but I also play music. I like to create in any aspect, whatever that might be. Um, but I think when I was doing meditation regularly, yeah, I had started to. Uh, I think that is, I never thought about it, but it does correspond to when I started to play with the projector in my photography. I use a projector as a light source, and I project images onto models and things like that. Um, yeah, that was about the same time. So it definitely opened me up to a new phase, for sure, artistically.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I never made that connection until just now.
Well, I just know when I started meditating, I was meditating daily for about 4 months. And that's when then I'd start getting full-blown poems and writing, through my meditations. So, that's why I was interested to see you being a creative. I wasn't creative at all before I started meditating. I was
Wow.
like, well, you'd read in books that, oh, everyone's got a creative spark. And I'd be like, well, where's mine? I've got
Right. Right.
nothing. And then boom,
Wow.
these all came through. And now I don't meditate anymore. As you said, you get to that point where I think after a certain period of meditation, you can just connect to that moment, to that God source without it. You can just, for me, I just drop into my heart and I'm in the exact same place. And when you were describing how your friend got you into meditation, like listen to the sounds, smell, the essential oils, maybe feel the breeze on your skin. When we come into
Mhm.
our senses, that brings us into the now moment. So it's
Mhm.
that now moment when we're in the meditative state. And from some other people I've interviewed, once you learn the skill of meditation, then you can now embody it and be a walking meditation. You might come out of it a few times, but ultimately, that's the goal because we know that feeling of peace and serenity and connectiveness. So when we can, we keep bringing ourselves back to that to become, this walking meditation. And of course, the creativity expands.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. That's, you can you can put yourself in that place. Once you are familiar enough with it and you know what it's all about, you can. And my friend Steve, who's the one I'm talking about, he is a saxophone player in a very, very popular band called that 70s band here on Long Island. And they play all the time, and it's always crowded and people dancing all over the place. And he's talked about how he can actually be on stage and feel like, oh, I need a moment, and he can bring himself into that meditative state right on stage, right in the middle of everything happening, and just kind of be there, and even be aware of, look around and smile, but just be in his heart. Yeah, it's
Yes, that's
amazing.
fascinating. I love this.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, Michael, what would you say were your top three values?
My top three values. I think integrity is one. It's a very important word, and again, it's the kind of thing, that you learn, and I think you learn through your own integrity, what it means. And you know as we were talking about earlier, I think there was a state when I was younger where I didn't have that integrity, and that when I got older I realized what it was and what it meant, and how important it was to me. So I was able to live by that. So integrity is one.
I'll just
I
stop you
think.
there. Sorry, Michael.
Okay.
What's your definition of integrity?
I think integrity is uh one, being true to your word, the four agreements. I think integrity is expressed in the four agreements, being true to your word. I think being pure with your intentions is integrity. Um I think being and I think being pure with your attention is being a loving human being, to other human beings, you know. Um yeah,
Yeah,
that's what integrity is. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Yeah. So go on. What's number two?
Number two, I think, is authenticity. That's been a very important one for me in the past couple of years. Um, and I think it's my own authenticity. I was talking to somebody recently about realizing that in the last few years, something that I've come to enjoy very much about myself and who I am is my ability to navigate my relationships with people, and just really understand how different people are and handle people accordingly. And for the most part successfully. I don't think anybody can handle everybody 100% successfully all of the time. um that's kind of what makes us human, but that's something that has been successful. So I think it's my authenticity that has allowed that me to do that, but also be able to recognize it a little bit easier. I think authenticity is, something that, I saw it in you immediately. It's like, uh, authenticity is something that you can't fake, and I think is something that is really engaging to other people because I think it's easy to sense.
I
So
love
yeah.
this. I love what you said about being able to, I can't remember the word you used, but, communicate well with all different people, whatever is thrown at you. Have you got any tips for that? How did you come into this place where,
Mm.
you can communicate healthily with a whole spectrum of people?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of understanding my own flaws. You know what I mean? That I'm not perfect, and if I expect people to accept me, with my flaws, then I need to accept people with their flaws. I think, that's one of the biggest things for me. That's part of integrity and part of authenticity is understanding that, um if you want to see anything in this world, you've got to be that. You know what I mean? It's like the world owes you nothing. So just by putting something out there, you can know that it's out there. So when I put out love, I do it because I want to know that love is out there, and I can't expect anybody else to show me that. I need to show myself that by being love. Um, and so, I think that's just part of my philosophy. I forgot what tangent I took to get to where I was going. I was talking about authenticity.
Oh, I was just asking you for the tips on, like good
Yeah.
communication with a whole
Yeah.
spectrum of people.
Yeah. So one of the things I think also that's been really interesting about this platform and what we're doing right here is with my show, I talk about consciousness and spirituality. I had a viewer who contacted me, who must have felt very comfortable with me and said, "Hey, I really love what you guys are doing. And I have an idea, and just hear me out, tell me what you think, and maybe you could help me." She wanted to do her own show, and she said, and this gets a little interesting, so bear with me. She said she wants to do a show called The Strange and Unusual. And I said, "Oh, tell me what it's about." And she said, "Well, it's about strange and unusual people. And just to show that, they're kind of just like you and me." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, for instance, I'm pretty strange. I'm in a relationship with a doll." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I have this, life-size doll that, is I call my girlfriend, and I spend time with her, and I dress her up, and I love her, and I also have a boyfriend who's a real human." And for me, like, my mind started going, and it didn't start going anywhere where it shouldn't. So in other words, I wasn't like, "Well, do you make out with the doll?" Or I wasn't thinking anything like that. I was more curious about the humanity of it, and like the philosophy behind it, and the psychology behind it, and like, well, what does that even mean? Like, how do you express your feelings? How does the doll express its feelings? And so I think just from that kind of interaction, I felt my brain expanding a little bit and becoming more accepting, of things that maybe I didn't understand. And I said, "Why don't we call it Strange and Wonderful instead of Strange and Unusual?" And she was like, "Oh, that's so great." So I helped her start a show. She was quite a bit younger, and she's like from the middle of the country, so it's very different. There's like a thick drawl and an accent, and she has a bit of a speech impediment. And so when I met her, I kind of felt drawn to help her. She wouldn't be the kind of person that you would think would be a host of a show because of her speech, and she seemed a little unsure of herself. She was very inexperienced, but I felt called to help her do this because I felt like it would mean a lot to her. So I said, "Here's what I want you to do. You're going to get the guests. You're going to create the artwork. You know what I mean? I'll facilitate the StreamYard, the broadcast, and I'll be your co-host. But just until I feel like you're ready to do it on your own." Um, and she brought on the first show somebody from her community of. There's a community for people who have relationships with dolls, apparently, and somebody from her community who was a trans woman. Um, and Gemma, let me tell you, like, I literally felt my heart and my head expanding as I had this conversation. Like, I was just so amazed at my own self, how I navigated the conversation, and the things that I was talking about with this person. And they opened up about their story about abuse and certain things that led to where she is now. But uh, let me tell you, like, I literally walked away changed from that conversation. And that is why I love doing this so much, because you never know what conversation you're going to have with somebody that's just going to spark those thoughts in your brain, and make you be like, "Oh, I get it. I totally get it." You know what I mean? And that's what this has been for me, just a great way to do it. And why I love your show so much too, because the human experience is all about everybody's different. everybody's got a different perspective, and it's okay. Not only is it okay, but those perspectives are meant to be shared, not fought over, and not, not as divisive elements, but as connective elements. Like, oh, you experienced this, let's talk about it so I can kind of vicariously experience it instead of reject it, you know.
Definitely, I can definitely relate to what you're saying. There is, and it's something, of course, I mean, the story behind this, it just sort of happened, but, I never gave it any thought before I started. But this is why I think, well, I didn't choose the show. The show was chosen for me. But what I've come to understand is a huge responsibility. People are there opening their hearts, and some of the things that people say, I'm thinking, wow, they're so brave and courageous, and I feel so honored that they're opening up there in front of my eyes. But I'm also so aware that I have to come from a very, and which is easy for me, because a very non-judgmental, neutral position, because uh, every reaction, or is there for everyone to see. So I totally get where you're coming from. It's definitely an honorable place to be.
I was just going to say, it's like such an honor to feel that way, that you can be that kind of a facilitator for others. So, I was saying earlier, like, I'm not particularly like a light worker, but I am, just by virtue of who I am, and how I treat people, and the conversations that I have. It's not traditional or a very specific light work. My girlfriend does Reiki, you know what I mean? And one of my best friends is a psychic medium, and those gifts are amazing. But I feel like so honored for my gift, you know what I mean? Because I can make people feel comfortable. I can honor them, with by creating space for them, which is what you're doing here for me. It's just, it feels great. I mean, I can imagine the surprise at the experience that you must have had. And I love the fact that your show just kind of called to you, and said, this is what you're going to do, and you agreed. You said, okay, I'll do it. For me, it's my happy place. And I say that every week. I'm like, I'm so happy it's Thursday, and to be here, like, is it a commitment? And it's because I do mine live every Thursday. Is it a commitment and sometimes tough to be here? Yes, but that's what kind of makes it so much fun, because I created it. It's like, I always am impressed, and what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired by people who create their own life, right? By doing what they do. They've created either a position, or they've created, something like you've done here, like I've done with my show. Like, I mean, am I making millions of dollars? No. But do I feel like that? Yes. I feel like it's a calling, and I feel like it's a special place to be, and an honor to be there. And I'm so grateful to be able to do it. I mean, all of the things that you probably experience as well.
Yeah, and we'll drop Michael's YouTube link in the description below. So we've got authenticity and integrity. What's your third highest value?
Hmm. There's a few things that I want to say, so let me see if I can narrow it down. um I think it's humility. I think it's knowing that you are great, but not needing anybody else to know. you know yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Great definition there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not needing the validation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just a part of humility. I mean, knowing that you don't know everything, you know what I mean? And that's part of humility too. But like I said, I think it's like knowing that you are great, knowing that you are part of that divine source that we were talking about, and just knowing is enough for you. You don't need anybody else to know. You know what I mean? You don't need to do anything about it other than just know it and feel it.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. So, Michael, we've got about half an hour left. I'm not sure exactly what time we started because we
Oh
started
wow.
a bit earlier, but I've got an idea. So, what else needs to be brought into this conversation?
Oh, that's an interesting thing. What else needs to be brought into this conversation? Um, well, I mean, I feel like you've you've found something here that gives you purpose or like fulfills a purpose and it comes from you, you know what I mean? I think that's so important, and also part of that advice, kind of that same thing you were asking about, you know, what do you tell men who are struggling? I think part of why I am the way I am is because of looking out at other people and seeing them struggle so much um with just daily life, you know what I mean, just existence, because they are still covered with these layers of I'm supposed to be beautiful, I'm supposed to be thin, I'm supposed to be rich, you know, I'm supposed to be popular, I'm supposed to be whatever it is that they feel they're not, and not realizing that they are all of those things, you know what I mean? And they're well, not all of the, it's not specifically, they are exactly what they're supposed to be, right? So you know, one of the big things I always say, I post on Facebook all the time, like, you know, you might be wondering what is the purpose of existence, but the answer to that question is you are the purpose to existence for you. Everybody is their own purpose of existing, you know what I mean? And you know, I think once you realize that, then you start to actually have that purpose. And again, that's why I think you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, because um connecting people and bringing awareness to that we are connected and that there is a collective, I think is important to you and it's important to me. You know, I had a show last night, I had my dentist on, and he told me, he's like, what you're doing is saving humanity. And I was just like, oh my, I was blown away by his perception of that, but I totally understood what he was saying, you know. And going back to the other guy that is very cynical, who I deal with all the time, like, you know, again, trying to just get the simple concept of the energy and the vibe that you put out into the world is what you're responsible for. And what do you want the world to be, you know? I mean, realize that when you're putting that cynical energy out, that that's what you're telling the universe you want the world to be. And you know, again, I think once you really realize those things, it becomes so much easier to live that way. I mean, I know people who seem like they're so happy, and people get mad at them, like, that can't be real, you know, that person, they've got to get upset sometimes, and you know, that can't be real, and they get upset by it, and I'm like, why is it upsetting you that somebody else is so happy? Like, you know, and take a look at yourself, because that shouldn't upset you. And also know that that person wakes up occasionally and has a doubt in their head, just because they're human, you know what I mean? And they're just not going to show it, because their philosophy is guides them to not show that, you know what I mean? Like, I certainly have negative thoughts and negative moments, but because of who I am, I know that that's not what I want to contribute to the world. So I'll you know, I'm not going to say I hold it in and it's like a bad thing. I'm just going to say I just choose not to express it in a way that maybe I would have in the past, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned before about, of course, most people present one persona to the public, and within their family and intimate community, they're quite a different person. And you spoke about being angry sometimes.
Mhm.
What makes you angry?
uh Not a lot. But I think not being understood, And I think especially not being understood by somebody like your mom, who you're supposed to be so close to, and supposed to be, one of the people who understands you the most, uh not being understood, that makes me angry. And in my recent interactions, and kind of bumping heads with my mom, one of the things that I use, I think, as a bit of a tool, is to try to not take accountability for her feelings. So if she's telling me that she's upset with me, instead of me getting angry and at her for being upset with me, I kind of am like, well, that's your choice. I'm not trying to upset you intentionally. So if you're upset because of something I did, then you're deciding that that's how you're going to react to it. And she gets even madder when I say that.
Do you think her telling you that she's upset is her trying to control you or manipulate you?
You know what? I'm gonna say yes and no. I'd like to believe that she's not intentionally trying to manipulate me, but yes, I believe there's a part of her ego, uh, or ego just in general, that is, trying to manipulate me and trying to feel better, about itself by saying what I did is wrong because of the way it made her feel, you know. So if she tells me that, I did something wrong, then it validates her feelings, you know what I mean? And so when I tell her, no, I didn't do anything wrong, it's just you're deciding to have those feelings, that's why she gets even madder.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because, as you said, you're coming into this awareness of pure authenticity. And then, to bring it home to mum and mum saying, well, that upsets me. Like, how do you navigate that?
It's very difficult, and you know what, like I said, I feel like there's a part of me that enjoys that challenge, and I don't even want to say enjoys that challenge, but even the idea that I view it as a challenge and not as a fight and an interaction, it's like, oh, it's a situation that I need to navigate now, right? I need to figure out how to navigate this situation. Um, and so I think that's how I'm constantly growing, by realizing again those things that are so important to me, accountability and integrity, like I need to watch myself all the time and be like, oh, am I demonstrating accountability? Am I demonstrating integrity here? Or, how do I feel about what I'm doing? And I think that's where it starts for everybody. They start to, just being able to say, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. You know what I mean? That's where you start, you know. Um, so
It's one thing, isn't it, to be able to, sort of let go of friends and as we shift and we change vibration, we start unaligning with people and realigning with, other people that are of a similar vibration. But, when it's family members, as you said, maybe your mum, that is a lot tougher than letting go of friends. Have you got any more to say around that for maybe people who are going through a similar experience?
yeah, I guess like I was saying, um I feel like I do believe in the philosophy of everything happens for a reason. I believe in the philosophy that everything is exactly as it should be. So believing those things, that's how I need to take a step back from these situations, and instead of reacting with my knee-jerk reactions or my emotions, I need to take a step back and say, okay, again, it's a situation I need to navigate. I can say F off mom and hang up the phone, and that's leaves me in that space, in that dynamic right there with my mom. Or I can say, hey, let me process this, and let's talk about this later, or handle it in some other way, to really kind of de-escalate, the situation or the emotions I might be feeling at that moment. And you know what, that's not to say that I think emotions are important. I think it's important to feel through something. But it's also important to recognize that in that particular situation, it's not just me in the situation. I'm in a situation with another being, and I need to also take that into consideration outside of everything else.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, Michael, it's been such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome talking to you.
Um, so we're going to drop your YouTube link below, and you did say that you do shows every Thursday. That's the live stream of consciousness.
Yep.
Any other social media links? Where can people find you?
So I have my kind of visual portfolio at photosynthesis.com. So I'm a big I love play on words. So my last name is Zinn, and I'm a photographer, and I take photos and I manipulate them and change them, and I give them light or give them energy. And so photosynthesis just kind of came naturally. So photosynthesis.com is my website, and then Papageddon is my Instagram at Papageddon. That's Poppageddon, and the story behind that is in 2012, or actually in 2011. 2012 was rapidly approaching, and I don't know if you're familiar with Nostradamus prophecies, and there were prophecies around that time that the world was going to end in 2012. So I was at my folks' house. They live in Arizona, for Thanksgiving. So it was November of 2011. And this idea hit me: what's going to happen to the Sports Illustrated swimwear calendar if the world ends? So I came up with this idea in my head of a spoof of like a kind of like a girly calendar or a swimsuit calendar, post-apocalyptic. And I came up with this concept called Women of Armageddon. And my girlfriend at the time was a makeup artist. And she said, I know some friends who do cosplay and stuff, and they might be interested in this idea. Let's make it happen. And we literally got home. It was like November, and made a bunch of calls, got a bunch of people involved, did a bunch of photos, and she made the costume. She was a makeup artist and costumes. And by December 25th, I had completed a calendar called Women of Armageddon. It was the first in the next 6 years. I did a calendar called Women of Armageddon. And it was just such an amazing experience, because it was your whole life. When you're young, people tell you you can do anything that you set your mind to, and it's such an abstract statement. You're just like, oh, whatever. But when I didn't even realize it as I was going through the experience of creating the calendar, but when the box arrived at my house and I opened up that box of calendars and I held it in my hand, I was literally holding in my hand that sentiment. You can do anything you set your mind to. I had it in my hand. It was life-changing. It was such an amazing experience. So Papageddon kind of became my nickname. I know that was a long story to explain my Instagram name, but
A great story, and very, valid for this series. So definitely happy to hear that. What's your final message to men, Michael? Men that I know we've said before, but are struggling in general with, what's, unfolding, let's say in America at the moment.
again, the most important thing, I think, that I guess there are a few like basic keys to happy living, right? But the most important one is self-love. Look at yourself and really examine how you feel about yourself, and determine and realize whether that's, oh wow, I don't love myself, or maybe realize that you do love yourself. But know that it's important to know whether you do or not. You know what I mean? Don't just let it be like, oh, I think I love myself. Love yourself unconditionally, no matter what. If you screw up and you make a bad decision and you do something wrong, love yourself. Love yourself. That's
Do you think the test is to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and smile, connect with yourself? And do you
I
think
think
that's
that's
a good
important.
litmus test?
I think that is a a bit of a test. You know what I mean? I think I think everybody knows deep down inside, am I looking at myself and smiling, and is that genuine? Like it's, again, it's not necessarily something you want to face, but there's a bit of shadow work right there, and just looking in the mirror and smiling and saying, is that genuine? That is a bit of shadow work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, again, thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for being
Thank you.
I think, what number are we up to? I think I think we're up to maybe 72.
I'm so honored to be a part of what you're doing. It's amazing, and I see the men that you interview with these amazing resumes and accomplishments, and I'm just like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? But I love talking to you so much. I think it's important. Here's something important I also want to say. When you do get to the point where you could unconditionally love yourself, it makes it so much easier to unconditionally love the world around you. And Gemma, when I saw you on Jesse's show, I fell in love with you. And I love that I can say that, and it's not like a romantic thing. It's a genuine human thing. Like you are. I'm so happy that there are human beings out there like you, and that's what I felt immediately, and I continue to feel through this conversation and beyond. So thank you so much.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for seeing my heart.
And you as well. Thank you for seeing mine.
Well, I didn't ask that question. Where does the heart come into it?
The heart is everything. I think the heart is I think you are your heart, and you uh, the biggest um I don't want to say dilemma, that's not the right word, but I think the biggest struggle that humanity is going through right now is, again, people do not see their own hearts, and that's the self-love thing I said. Look at yourself, look at your heart. Are you a good person? Do you treat other people good? Do you treat yourself good? Those kinds of things.
Boom. Okay, awesome. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you could like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back in a few days with another episode of Heart Warriors. Say bye.